ordinances. Item 6, status report on construction package 1. We could probably skip this since there's been no commentary on this recently. Actually, I have a feeling that a number of people, both in the staff and the board, would like to comment on this. So, Mr. Tapping, welcome.
Good morning, Chairman Richard, board. Pleasure to be in front of you again. My name is John Tapping. I'm the risk manager for the authority, and I'm here today. It's my pleasure to deliver a status report on construction package 1 procurement, the design build bid results, and where we are, and the process ahead. This is an informational item at this point. No board action is being requested at this time. Because the procurement process is still in process, it is subject to some finalization of documents and so forth. We are limited somewhat in what we can disclose publicly at this point, but basic information is going to be provided at this stage to update the board and the public on the process and the next steps. We will be working through the procurement process, and our intent is to present the contract for authority to award at the June 6th meeting. So we've been doing a number of things since we opened the price in order to verify the apparent best value proposal and to move forward into a recommendation of award, which we hope to do next month. On April 22nd, the authority identified Tudor, Perini, Zachary, Parsons, a joint venture, as the best scoring team for the design-build contract to begin construction on the Madera to Fresno segment. The authority had estimated the cost of the design-build contract to be between $1.2 billion and $1.8 billion, and the authority determined that Tudor, Perini, Zachary, Parsons, a California-based joint venture, who bid $985,142,530, was the apparent best value proposer. The ranking and the score of all 5 proposals is attached to your informational package. A little background on design-build procurement. As you know, design-build combines both the project design and construction phases of the contract into a single contract. It's a very common procurement mechanism in the industry, in the highway and railroad building industry. Also, there's the best value selection process as part of the design-build process. That is basically a process that considers things other than price when you're determining the apparent best value proposer. So in our particular procurement, we had set that at a 30% rating for the technical review and a 70% rating for the cost, the bid price. In November 2011, the authority issued a request for qualifications for potential design-build teams. 5 teams then submitted their qualifications, and these were reviewed by authority personnel and found to meet the threshold and were accepted, and then began the competing for the contract. In January 2013, the 5 teams submitted their proposals, which were objectively reviewed by an evaluation panel comprised of public employees, High-Speed Rail Authority management, and also other governmental managers and engineers. I think it's important to note that the technical proposals were evaluated twice before the prices were actually considered and or even opened. The prices were secured in a lock safe, and for the sanctity of the process, demanded that the technical review be performed totally independent of any price considerations. So the team went through an extensive review of qualifications. The first was essentially a pass-fail review, which had very specific criteria that was set forth in the information to proposers. And all of the 5 proposers passed that that review. And that entails such things as financial guarantee, financial statements, notes, letters of support, credit ratings, etc. It was a substantial review. So having passing the initial review, each proposal was then subjected to a detailed technical review. And there are such factors as project schedule, engineering concepts, problems and solutions, quality and safety were all reviewed and given a scoring for all 5 proposers. So at that point, after that review was concluded, we opened the bids and the bid prices and compiled the results. And the results are as indicated on the attached sheet, and through the balance of the 30 and 70% weighting, Tudor, Perini, Zachary, Parsons was the apparent best value proposer. So the next steps in going forward is, in fact, yesterday we reviewed Tudor's escrow bid documents, and that process went well. There are a number of other procedural issues we need to do, at which point the authority would issue an intent to award the contract. And that will come probably in the next week or two. And then from there we would recommend at the next board meeting authority to award that contract. So that's the general process of how we got to where we are today and where we intend to be going in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Morales, there's been some commentary on this contract. As people know, I have recused myself, even though I'm not legally required to do so. But since I think we're going to be talking about the process here for a moment, I just wanted to sit in and listen to this. There's been some commentary both in the press and, of course, some of our public speakers today. Anything you'd like to add to what Mr. Tapping had to say about the process here?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, and this entire discussion is about process, not the particulars of the procurement and of any potential award, which will come at the next board meeting, assuming we work through all the processes, as John indicated. I know this comes as a surprise to you, Mr. Chairman, and others, but we do have some critics, and we hear a lot of words, accountability, responsibility. As does everyone at the authority, I take my responsibilities very seriously, and I'm certainly accountable for the actions. Part of my responsibility is to correct the record when there's incorrect information out there, and certainly when there are misleading or even incorrect press reports, which then become the basis for further discussion and further press reports. And it's our responsibility to ensure that the public knows what the facts are. I am somewhat befuddled, I will admit, that we seem to have concern about an outcome that produced greater transparency, more competition, and better prices, which is what we did achieve. But I want to speak to some of the facts. Contrary to what has been suggested in various reports, there is in fact no requirement for the board to approve specific provisions of this RFP or of any construction RFPs. And many of you sit on other boards, many people in the audience sit on boards. I'm not aware of any board anywhere that gets into the details of a procurement document. This board is no different than any others. Staff is given discretion to develop the procurement documents under broad guidelines, and that's what happened here. In March of 2012, there was a resolution adopted, and that authorized staff to proceed with the RFP and gave specific approvals to include the stipends, and that was because that exceeded at the time, the acting CEO's delegated authority, so the board needed to act on those items. As has been noted, the chair recused himself from particulars, and the chair of the Finance and Audit Committee was then designated to work with staff as appropriate and necessary not because approval was required, but to address those issues which staff believe should come to the attention that the board should be aware of, certainly as we went forward. The staff did, in fact, consult with Mr. Rossi, acting in that capacity, on issues including the extension of the bidding deadlines. You may recall we extended the deadline for submission twice, as well as the changes in the evaluation, the improvements in the evaluation process, which have been the subject of a lot of discussion. The improvements in that process were made over 5 months before the proposals were submitted. They were made in August. Proposals were submitted in January, on January 18th of this year. All 5 proposers had the same information at the same time, knew how the proposals would be evaluated 5 months before they submitted them, had time to reflect those improvements in submitting their proposal. One thing I think is important, because people in California often are maybe more familiar with a design bid-build process under which the agency develops full designs, hands them over to a contractor and says, give me a price to build this. The design-build process, as Mr. Tapping noted, is different, and it's an iterative procurement process, meaning that there is back and forth with the potential bidders under very controlled circumstances as we go through, where all bidders are provided the same information. There's no discussion that happens with one without all of them knowing it. And the intent of that process is to improve the procurement and remove issues and make it a better document. Over the course of this procurement, we issued 9 addenda to the procurement, and those covered a very broad range of issues, some being as simple as correcting a grammatical error, or missing comma, or punctuation, most of them being highly technical data, the bidders wanting additional information to help them prepare their bids, and then ranging out to issues like the evaluation of the proposals. All told, those 9 addenda had over 1,000 changes in them. Just for comparison, another recent state design-build project, the Presidio Parkway in San Francisco, went through a similar process and had over 1,100 changes made through the procurement process. So again, this is common practice in this. Every single one of those changes was posted on our website, along with, when the addenda were issued, a summary log, which is a plain English summary version so that someone doesn't have to, if they don't want to, pour through 100 pages. They can look at a few cover pages that describe in plain English what the changes are that are being made. Every one of the changes was included in that. We have lots of people, reporters, interested members of the public, who take full advantage of the fact that we post all of our documents on the website. They scour the documents, which is certainly their right, and we make that possible by providing those documents. I can attest to how much detailed review there is by the public, because we have frequent discussions with people about very detailed provisions of all sorts of documents, including the procurement documents that we talked about. We made people aware of the availability of the information, and in fact received numerous inquiries about detailed provisions of the addenda, so we know people were accessing them. There have been some suggestions in the media and elsewhere that it's our responsibility to not only make the information available, but perhaps to identify to any given party what they may find of interest in those documents. I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that we can be in that position of determining what any one person would find important or relevant. We've had discussions, I can tell you, long discussions about things which, frankly, I would not see as overly significant, but are certainly important to someone else, and we have it. There are other issues that I would expect to have discussion over, and we don't. So, again, we can't be in the position of determining what someone will find as important. From a process perspective, our responsibility is to follow all the laws, all the rules, to make information available, and to improve the process as we go along to get the best outcome, and that's exactly what we've done. Which really, again, means that what we seem to be left with is a concern over the outcome. I want to be clear about the result. What we got as a result of the improvements we made through the procurement process were 5 very strong, technically sound bids. As Mr. Tapping said, even under this improved process, had any one of those technical proposals not been fully compliant with all of the requirements, had there been any reason to believe that any one of the bidders could not meet all of the requirements, deliver the program exactly as needed, they would not have been past the first screening of the evaluation, would not have had their prices opened, even under this process. And again, as Mr. Tapping indicated, it's very important to note the technical reviews, 2 levels of technical review, took place with the prices remaining in a sealed vault. So there was no way that the reviewing committee had any idea of what the prices were when they were reviewing the technical. And again, had any party, any one of the 5, not been fully technically compliant and sound, their price would not have been opened. Because of the stipend process, we get the advantage of all the intellectual property in all 5 proposals and are now able to use those to the benefit of the program. Through competition and improvements, we secured very good bid prices, which will mean saving hundreds of millions of dollars as we go forward. And again, all of this in full public view with no advantage given to anyone. It was noted before, some comments I made, and I'll repeat them. I frankly imagine that had we not improved the process and done things the way we would, we'd be hearing from any number of people, maybe even the same ones, about how we had not gotten the benefit of competition and would have left money sitting on the table. And that is not a situation we wanted to be in. If we had 5 technically sound bids, we wanted the opportunity to be able to get the best value for the state. So, Mr. Chairman, just in closing, I'd say the bottom line is we improved the process in full consistency with the board direction, with all laws, regulations, the process. This is what we're supposed to do, and we got a very favorable outcome for the state, and I'm pleased with that and look forward to moving forward when the time comes.
Thank you. I'd just like to add a couple of comments to Mr. Morales' summary, which I appreciate very much. And I also appreciate the way that this process played out. I was a bystander because, as I've said before publicly, prior to coming onto this board, I had done some consulting work for one company that is part of the bid team process. And once I understood that they were going to be part of one of the 5 bidders, I've stepped away from any discussions or deliberations or certainly decisions having to do with this contract. So I've watched it as I think an interested private citizen would. And when I read the first press account, which to my amazement managed to turn what was a very favorable outcome for the tax-paying public, bids that were coming in somewhere between 18 and 40% below the engineer's estimate. I couldn't believe that anybody could try to turn that into a negative. And in fact, it was interesting because there was a lot of press commentary about a poll that was done a few months ago. I think it was the Public Policy Institute, and there were big banner headlines that there was a slight minority of people supporting high-speed rail, and they were saying this was an erosion of the high-speed rail program support. And yet if you read into it, it indicated that 68% of Californians still wanted to see high-speed rail go forward, and that in fact, if they thought that the program could be accomplished at cheaper cost, that minority of support very quickly went to a very robust majority of support. So here we were coming in with the very first construction contracts substantially below any of the engineers' estimates, which portended great things for the high-speed rail program if we can continue to move it forward in this bidding environment. I'll also point out that a couple of years ago, I was talking to one of the consultants who told me that if it were he would be advising people not to bid on our first construction package, that there was too much uncertainty around the program, the legislature had not acted, and that he thought that the rational thing for most of the big contractors to do was to sit out the first construction package, see how things went, and then jump in afterwards. And I remember being very concerned that that might be, in fact, the case, which, heaven forbid, we would have had only one bidder. In fact, because of the way this board, my colleagues, without my involvement, went forward with a stipend package that was also subject of commentary. In fact, because of the way that we persevered and got out into the bidding environment at a time when the economy is slow, all 5 of the pre-qualified bid teams competed. I mean, that in itself said 2 very important things. One, those major international consortia believed that this program was important, they wanted to be part of it, and 2, they were willing to compete, and it was that level of competition that brought the prices down. So, again, looking back at how the High-Speed Rail Authority board and organization approached this, I think it's a very good result for the public. And I guess I would just end my comments with this, and I'm sure Mr. Wilcox will not be happy about this, because this is the kind of thing he tried to get me to not say in public. But, I remember just the other day seeing yet another press story about this, and what it brought to mind was a scene from a movie, Absence of Malice, which is in fact about the newspaper business. And at the end of that movie, there's a very interesting interchange between 2 reporters, and one says to the other, "Well, what you said is true, isn't it?" And the first reporter says, "No, but it's accurate." So some of the press reports on this may have been accurate with respect to a careful delineation of certain discrete elements, but they've not been true, because they've implied that somehow there was some intent here to jigger the rules to get a certain outcome. And that is completely false and completely bogus. What was done here, I think, was highly professional and completely consistent with the public interest. And frankly, I resent any implication to the contrary, which was the innuendo that was in some of those reports. So let's just put that to rest. What we've got here, thanks to Mr. Morales and thanks to my colleagues on the board, is a result that's going to allow us to move into construction of high-speed rail at costs substantially below what people thought it was going to turn out to be. That's a very good result. We ought to be celebrating that. So those were my comments on that. Thank you for indulging me. And Mr. Wilcox, now you can feel free to leave. Mr. Hartman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the prefatory comments by the CEO and yourself. I think it's important as we look at this to step back. The policies that the board enacted that enabled this to go forward, I think produced in a very transparent way qualified folks who could design and build what we're tasked with having designed and built, and did so in a transparent, competitive environment. I think the point really is that those folks who were involved in putting together their packages and proposals all had the same rules that they were complying with. They had the same information as each other, and they had the same ability to react to changes that were discussed with all of them along the way in a manner in which it was intended to make it a better process even for those who were bidding. And I think that gets lost in the discussion that this was an iterative process in the sense that it was intended to make it the best possible both for those who would be able to bid on a level playing field and for the authority and the public to get the best deal possible from a team that could actually design and build what we're tasked with getting done. the grander issues as to whether or not we should have high-speed rail in California and how that balances with other social needs are not those that are in front of us as an authority. We have certain legal responsibilities, and that's what we're attempting to meet. And so I know the board members don't get distracted by the grander rhetorical questions. We all have our opinions on those, but they're not what's important for us as we are faced with these decisions. And so what I look at, however, in terms of this process is that I want to make sure that, number one, that I understand that in the design-build process, that the very essence of that is to have a party who is building this who will have less likelihood of submitting change orders because of the whole nature of this process. And secondly, will have been selected in a way that is absolutely clear, price aside, that they have the technical, financial, and personnel competence to deliver on what is promised. And I think the process has been set up to ensure that, but I think it's important for people to understand that the design build, as we've described it, is substantially different than when somebody hires a contractor to remodel their kitchen or their bathroom and it gets totally out of control from the very beginning, and it seems like it never ends and costs tremendously more than you ever planned. You know, this design build process is a totally different process, and I think, you know, people need to understand that. But we need to be given the assurances as a board that what we've set out is really, and what we're getting is what we're promised. And I think that that's part of our responsibility. So that gets me also in a long-winded way, which you've grown accustomed to me being, is the technical side of it and the technical ranking. We have a balancing of the financial and the technical as we have our rankings, and we see that the first two folks are very close in ultimate ranking, but there's a significant difference in terms of pricing. And what I want to hear more about is the technical qualification side, and to knowing that despite the significant, what would appear on the surface to be on a point basis a significant difference between what I call the first and second place bidders, is that reflective of a true significant difference in the ability of the lowest dollar bidder to deliver what's promised, and you know, are we going to deliver what's promised? And that's what I want to hear more about when we're getting the information in advance of the next meeting. I think it's really important that we get that. Secondly, I think it's important as the staff review the technical qualifications and separated out the pricing to have those separate. But I also think it's important for us to know something more about the people who would be doing this project. And I know it wasn't the intent to give us all the lowdown on that for today's meeting, but I think it's important for us to know more about those folks that are being recommended as a result of this competitive process. And so I want to know more about each of the partners, as well as their partnership in terms of who does what within their joint ventures as they would proceed. I want to know more about the evaluation of their prior design build projects, their experience in that, so that we can be assured that they've been through this, that how they've fared in other projects. Because I want to be data-driven here. I don't want to be press-driven, and I don't want to be driven by summaries. I want to be driven by data. So those things are important to me to evaluate whether or not to approve what would be the recommendation at the next meeting.
Thank you. Other comments at this point? With that, thank you, Mr. Tapping. We'll move on to the next item, and